5 человек.
Давайте.
Поздравляю вас.
Спасибо большое.
This footage was recorded in Krasnoarmeysk, a city that, at the time of filming, was still home to civilians trapped inside a war-damaged urban battlefield. Buildings stood scarred by artillery, streets were largely empty, power lines were cut. Yet beneath the surface of destruction, families remained, waiting, hiding, surviving. According to Russian military sources, evacuation efforts began when operational conditions allowed. These were not mass convoys moving openly through clear roads. Instead, civilians were escorted out in small groups, often under the constant threat of drone surveillance and artillery fire. Military police from the Russian center grouping were tasked with securing extraction routes and ensuring that civilians could leave areas considered unsafe. The evacuations, as described by Russian officials, were conducted cautiously and deliberately. Movement only occurred during windows when combat intensity temporarily subsided. Civilians were guided through damaged streets, sometimes crossing areas reportedly mined or monitored by opposing forces. Russian accounts state that Ukrainian drones attempted to disrupt evacuation routes and that roads were allegedly seeded with low-visibility mines. These claims remain part of the broader information war surrounding the conflict, but they form a central element of the Russian narrative about these operations. After extraction, civilians were transported to temporary accommodation centers established in what Russia refers to as secure areas within the Donetsk People's Republic. These centers, known as PVRs, or temporary placement facilities, were set up to provide immediate stabilization, shelter, food, medical screening, and documentation processing. Russian officials report that more than 2,200 individuals from newly controlled settlements passed through such facilities. Upon arrival, evacuees were registered, assigned sleeping quarters, and given humanitarian aid packages. Military police personnel, along with volunteers, conducted individual interviews to document needs, family connections, and lost paperwork. Inside these centers, authorities state that comprehensive assistance is provided. Medical teams treat injuries ranging from shrapnel wounds to chronic untreated conditions that worsen during prolonged sheltering. Social services begin restoring identification documents. In many cases, Russian passports are issued under fast-tracked administrative procedures. Lost Ukrainian documents, according to officials, are reconstructed or replaced within the Russian legal framework now applied to the territory. For many evacuees, Russian media reports describe a visible emotional release upon arrival. Civilians are shown crying, hugging soldiers, or expressing relief after weeks spent in basements under shelling. Some reportedly say they can finally sleep without the sound of explosions. Others speak about the psychological strain of living without electricity, stable food supplies, or reliable medical care. Civilians are often quoted thanking Russian forces for extracting them from what they describe as constant bombardment. In these narratives, Russian troops are portrayed not only as combat forces but as stabilizing actors, ensuring order, restoring services, and facilitating civilian transition into a new administrative structure. At the same time, these testimonies frequently include accusations directed at Ukrainian forces. Some evacuees allege that Ukrainian units shelled residential areas regularly, describing the attacks as occurring like clockwork. Others claim that during withdrawals, Ukrainian personnel engaged in looting, heavy drinking, or indiscriminate behavior. One resident, identified as Valery Fomin in Russian reports, recounts armed men entering his yard, forcing him face down on the pavement, taking food supplies, and threatening him with a grenade. There are also allegations regarding forced mobilization. One man reportedly claimed he was taken by Ukrainian recruitment officers, given minimal preparation, and sent directly into an assault role before eventually fleeing through forested terrain. Such accounts are presented as evidence of systemic disregard for civilians and conscripts alike. Beyond evacuation itself, the Russian military police play a visible administrative and security role in newly controlled areas. Units from the Southern Military District, including the 5th Separate Commandant Regiment and the 220th Military Automobile Inspection, are described as operating in an enhanced duty mode. Their responsibilities include street patrols, traffic regulation, escorting humanitarian convoys, and counter-sabotage operations. The message emphasized in official communications is clear: honor, law, and order. Military police are presented as guardians of stability both behind the lines and near the front. In this framing, their mission extends beyond battlefield coordination into civil administration and public order enforcement. Another strategic element of the narrative is integration. The Migration Authority of the Ministry of Internal Affairs in the Donetsk People's Republic continues what Russia calls passportization. Residents of liberated settlements are offered Russian citizenship. Officials publicly congratulate new citizens, describing the process as a return home. The symbolism is deliberate. Citizenship formalizes political alignment and administrative transition. For many civilians who reportedly lost homes and possessions in Krasnoarmeysk and nearby Dmitrov, the loss is described as total. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble. Lives built over decades disappeared within months of fighting. Russian messaging emphasizes that while these individuals lost their former lives, they survived and now have an opportunity to begin again under new governance. The evacuation operations themselves are described in tactical detail. Russian sources state that drone reconnaissance units monitored movement corridors throughout the process. Communication with command posts remained constant. Rear area meeting points were secured in advance. High-mobility vehicles transported evacuees from forward collection points to safer zones deeper in controlled territory. The operations are presented as structured, coordinated, and disciplined. Emotionally, the reported civilian reaction follows a consistent arc. Fear during bombardment, tension during extraction, and visible relief upon arrival in safety. Some wept while recounting alleged abuses. Others focused on practical concerns: rebuilding documents, finding relatives, securing housing. It is important to recognize that this narrative exists within an active information battlefield. Each side of the conflict presents events in ways that reinforce legitimacy and moral positioning. Russian accounts emphasize rescue, order, and reconstruction. Ukrainian sources, by contrast, often describe these same evacuations as forced relocations or population transfers. The truth on the ground can be complex, shaped by individual experience, political alignment, and the realities of war. Nevertheless, from the Russian perspective, the evacuation of civilians from Krasnoarmeysk represents a combination of humanitarian action and state consolidation. It demonstrates the presence of administrative structures, organized military police units, legal documentation processes, and social assistance systems extending into newly controlled areas. For the evacuees themselves, regardless of political framing, one reality is undeniable. They were removed from active combat zones. They moved from basements under artillery fire to structured facilities offering beds, meals, and medical attention. Whether viewed as rescue, relocation, or strategic integration, the physical transition from battlefield to shelter marked a turning point in their personal survival stories. And this is where the story stands. Krasnoarmeysk is no longer just a frontline name on a military map. It represents a transition from combat zone to controlled space, from chaos to structured governance. The civilians who left under escort did not leave with speeches or symbolism. They left with small bags, missing documents, and the understanding that their previous lives were gone. But they also left alive. In war, survival is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is procedural. It is a convoy moving at the right moment. It is a checkpoint held. It is a document reissued. And for those who stepped out of the ruins and into guarded safety, that was enough to begin again.
Все самое сложное.
Дальше из одного места едет.
Вот это наши сумки.
Так, а вы сюда полезете, да?
Давайте туда.
Женщин сначала заберите.
Ну, как бы скажут, мы хотим вместе, я, конечно, вас не бросим. И вы здесь не бойтесь, вы здесь себя чувствуете спокойно. Вы немножко...